I am Elijah Thompson. I'm 75 years old and I just buried my only son. But the dirt wasn't even settled on his casket when my daughter-in-law Carla gave me 60 days to get out of my house. The house I built with my own hands. She thought I was just a broke, heartbroken old man. She thought she had won. I just smiled, packed a small fishing bag, and left. She never should have underestimated me. Because the next morning she didn't get a realtor. She got the Riverside Police. Before I tell you exactly how I unraveled her web of lies, please let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And please like and subscribe to this channel if you believe that justice must always be served, no matter how long it takes. The cool October wind at Greenwood Cemetery cut right through my thin suit, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. I stared at the polished wood of the casket as it was lowered into the red clay. Marcus, my son, 45 years old, years gone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. 45. How does a healthy 45-year-old man just die? A sudden heart attack, the report said. My mind just couldn't make it fit. Marcus was a mechanic, a good one. He had strong hands, hands that could fix anything. He'd changed the oil in my truck just 2 weeks ago, laughing as he lifted the engine block like it was nothing. He didn't have a weak heart. He had the strongest heart I knew. Around me, my community, the friends I'd known for 55 years here in Riverside. They were crying with me. Pastor Green put a heavy hand on my shoulder. My neighbor, Mrs. Rose, was sobbing into a handkerchief. We were a family sharing this impossible grief. And then there was Carla, my daughter-in-law. She stood next to me, but she was a million miles away. She wore a designer black dress shoes with heels too high for a cemetery and sunglasses so big they covered half her face. She wasn't crying. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. While the preacher spoke about going home to glory, Carla was checking her watch, a sleek, expensive-looking smartwatch. I saw her thumb swipe across the screen, then the quiet click as she locked it and put it back down impatient. The preacher said, "Amen." My friends began to move toward me to offer one last word of comfort. I wanted to stay. I needed a minute alone with my boy. But before I could even take a breath, Carla's hand clamped onto my arm. Her nails perfectly manicured and blood red dug into my sleeve. "That's enough, Eli," she whispered. Her voice wasn't filled with grief. It was sharp annoyed. "Let's go. We have guests." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the woman my son loved. I saw a stranger. The reception back at my bungalow in Old Town was a blur. My house, the one I'd built with my late wife Maria, was filled with the smell of collard greens and fried chicken that my neighbors had brought over. People were talking in hushed tones, sharing stories about Marcus. I saw them look at the photos on the mantle. Me and Maria on our wedding day. Marcus as a little boy in a baseball uniform missing his 2 front teeth. I just sat in my old armchair, the one Maria had passed away in 12 years ago, and felt numb. One by one, the guests left. "Call us if you need anything, E. We're praying for you, Brother Thompson." Finally, the house was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was go to my room and be alone with my memories. Carla walked in from the kitchen. She'd changed out of her black funeral dress. She was wearing jeans and a tight-fitting red sweater. She looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms. "The show's over." I looked up the fog of my grief, making her words sound strange. "Show." "The crying Barcei," she said, her voice flat. "The sad old man routine. And it's done. We need to talk." I tried to stand, my knees aching. "Carla, can't talk right now. I'm tired. I just buried my son." "I know," she said, "and I need you to listen. I need you to stop crying. Pack your bags and get out." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. The air left my lungs. Get out. Yes, get out." I stood up straight, the shock cutting through my exhaustion. "Carla, what are you talking about? This is my home. I built this house with Maria. I raised Marcus in this house." Carla actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that didn't belong in this house of mourning. "No, Eli, not anymore." She walked over to the kitchen drawer. My kitchen drawer, the one where I keep the warranties and the spare keys, and pulled out a folder. She slapped it down on the coffee table in front of me. Marcus signed this 8 weeks ago, she said, tapping the top page. It's a quitclaim deed. He signed the house over to me. I fumbled for my reading glasses, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put them on. I picked up the papers. It was legal jargon, but I saw the lines. Grant Marcus Thompson. Grantee. Carla Thompson, and at the bottom a signature, Marcus's signature, but it looked wrong. It was shaky. The A was too round. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would he do this? He would never. He was in debt, Carla said casually, inspecting her fingernails. Deep debt. We needed collateral for a loan. The house was the only thing he had of value that I could use. A lie. That was a lie. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. I had given Marcus the seed money to start his mechanic shop 12 years ago. He paid me back with interest in 5. That shop was successful. Marcus didn't owe anyone a dime. He was meticulous with his money just like his mother. He wasn't in debt. I said, my voice quiet. Oh, please, she scoffed. You don't know anything about his life. You're just the old man he visited on Sundays out of pity. He was in trouble. I helped him, and he gave me the house. He wouldn't do this, I insisted, the paper trembling in my hand. Not without talking to me. Well, he did. Carla snapped, her patience gone. And now he's dead, which makes me the sole owner. And I am selling this dump. I need the money. So you have 60 days. 60 days. 60 days, she repeated, leaning in her voice, dropping to a vicious hiss. And if you're not out by then, I will call the Riverside police and have you thrown out for trespassing. Do you understand me, old man? I just stared at her. This woman who my son had loved. This woman who I had welcomed into my home, who had eaten at my table. She had waited until the very day I buried my son to throw me out of my own house. I looked at the fake signature on the paper. I thought about her checking her watch at the cemetery. I thought about Marcus, healthy and strong, suddenly dying of a heart attack. I thought about the lie she just told me about the dead. And in that instant, something inside me changed. The overwhelming, crushing grief didn't disappear. It crystallized. It turned from a fog into a block of ice, cold, hard, and sharp. My hands stopped shaking. My back straightened. I looked up from the papers and met her gaze. She was expecting me to cry, to beg to fight. I just nodded slowly. All right, Carla. She blinked, completely thrown. She was not expecting this. All right, just like that. You're not going to fight if that's what the paper says. I said, my voice empty and flat. Then that's what it is. Good, she said, trying to regain her footing. She looked relieved but also confused. So, 60 days. I want you out by the 1st of the following month. I shook my head. I don't need 60 days. I turned and walked past her toward my bedroom. She followed me, her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I went to my closet. I pushed past my church suits and my work shirts. In the very back, under an old quilt Maria had made, was a small worn canvas duffel bag, the one I always kept packed for my fishing trips up at Lake Serenity. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Carla's eyes went wide. What? What is this? Were you planning on leaving? I zipped the bag. It was already packed with a change of clothes, my shaving kit, and a small hardbound ledger. I walked back into the living room. Carla. I said, my voice quiet. You have no idea what you've just done. I walked to the front door. Wait! She yelled, and for the first time I heard a flicker of panic in her voice. Where are you going? You can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people? I stopped at the door, my hand on the knob. I turned and looked back at her, standing in the middle of the house. Maria and I had built the house she had just stolen. I gave her a small, sad smile. I have things to do. I stepped out onto the porch into the cool night air. I pulled the door shut behind me, the familiar click echoing in the silence. I didn't look back. I heard the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place behind me. I walked down the steps onto the sidewalk of the street I had lived on for 55 years. I heard Carla laugh through the closed door, a high-pitched, victorious sound. Fine go, good riddance. She thought she had won. She thought the old man was broken and defeated, wandering off into the night. She had no idea that I wasn't wandering. I was walking toward a plan. She thought she had just inherited a small house. She had no idea she had just declared war on a man who owned half the block. I didn't go to the police. Not right away. I had a much more important stop to make. But I did make one phone call before I went to sleep in a clean, quiet hotel room. I called Laura Jenkins, my lawyer, the woman who had managed the Maria Thompson Trust for the last 12 years. I told her everything. What Carla said, the fake document, the 60-day threat. Laura is not a woman who wastes time. She said, "Go to sleep, E. I'll handle the morning." And she did. Carla probably slept better than she had in months there in my bed, in the bed I had shared with Maria. She must have woken up feeling like a queen. She probably thought I was sleeping on a park bench or in some downtown shelter, a broken old man with nowhere to go. I can see her walking through my house like she owned it, touching my wife's photographs, mentally measuring the walls for her new furniture. She made herself coffee in my kitchen. She used Maria's favorite mug, the one with the little blue flowers that Marcus had given her one Mother's Day. She sat at the table I built with my own hands, put her feet up on the very chair Marcus used to sit in, and she made the call she'd been dying to make. I can hear her voice now, all sugar and business. Yes. Hello. Is this Riverside Premier Realty? I'd like to list a property for immediate sale. It's in the Old Town District, a lovely vintage bungalow. Yes, it's vacant as of last night. The previous owner is gone. Gone just like that. Like I was a piece of trash she'd finally managed to take to the curb. She was probably smiling, calculating the value, imagining the money hitting her bank account when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It wasn't a neighbor bringing a condolence casserole. It was the kind of knock that doesn't ask. It demands 3 heavy, solid raps on the door frame that you feel in your chest. She was annoyed. I'm sure of it. She stomped to the door, ready to tell off whoever was interrupting her victory lap. She swung the door open. 2 Riverside police officers stood on my porch. Officer Harris, a tall brother with a face that had seen too much, and Officer Patel, a sharp woman, who looked like she didn't miss a thing. They were not smiling. "Ma'am," Officer Harris said, his voice deep, "we're looking for a Mr. Elijah Thompson." Carla's smile was all arrogance. She leaned against the doorframe, the perfect picture of the new homeowner. "He's not here. He left last night. I'm the new owner of this property. Can I help you with something? Officers?" Officer Patel looked past Carla, her eyes scanning my living room, then looked back at Carla. "New owner. That's interesting." Carla's smile tightened. She didn't like that word. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Officer Patel said, pulling out her official notepad. "We just received a formal complaint from Mr. Thompson's legal representative. The complaint is for illegal entry, trespassing, and unlawful occupation of this address." "Yeah." Laura told me later that the blood drained from Carla's face. All that smug confidence just evaporated. Illegal. Illegal entry. "What are you talking about?" "This is my house. My late husband left it to me. I live here." She was starting to sound hysterical. I bet my neighbor Mrs. Rose was already peeking through her blinds. "Good." Officer Harris held up a hand, calm and steady. "Ma'am, we're just here to take a report about the occupation, but that's not the only reason we were dispatched." Carla froze. I can see her now, her hand grabbing the door. What other reason?" Officer Harris looked down at his report. "We also received a formal request filed this morning citing new evidence to open an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Marcus Thompson." That was the moment the kill shot. Carla stumbled back, grabbing the doorframe to keep from falling. Her face, Laura said, the officers told her, went perfectly ghostly white. All the lies, all the arrogance, all the victory, it all shattered right there on my front porch. "Suspicious?" She whispered a word she could barely get out. It was a heart attack. The doctor said so." "That's what the initial report says, ma'am." Officer Patel said, her voice like steel. "But Mr. Dr. Thompson's attorney seems to believe otherwise. We'll need to ask you a few questions. And ma'am, you probably shouldn't try to sell this house. It's considered part of an active investigation now." Carla didn't say anything else. She just stared at them, her mind racing, finally understanding. The old man hadn't just wandered off to die. The old man hadn't gone to a homeless shelter. The old man had called his lawyer. The old man had called the police. The old man was fighting back. I wasn't at the police station. I wasn't sitting on a cold bench under fluorescent lights filling out forms. I was 50 floors above Riverside. The offices of Jenkins and Partners are on the top floor of the 900 River Tower building, all glass and steel looking out over the city I helped build. The world down there looked small, like tiny ants moving along a track. I sat in a high-backed black leather chair holding a cup of hot tea I didn't want. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped the moment I walked out of my house. Across the desk sat Miss Laura Jenkins. She's 50 sharp as a diamond, and the only person on earth besides me who knew the truth about Maria's will. She was wearing a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my truck. She's my lawyer, my financial manager, and the closest thing I have to a daughter. Her father and I used to run these streets together. She was on the phone, her voice cold and precise. Yes, Officer Harris, that's correct. Unlawful occupation, and yes, a formal request to investigate suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of the beneficiary, Marcus Thompson. I understand. Please keep me informed of your interaction with the occupant. Thank you. She hung up the phone and swiveled in her chair to face me. A small, tight smile played on her lips. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was a smile of satisfaction. Well, she said, it's done. The police are on your porch right now as you requested just a preliminary visit. No arrests. Not yet. She leaned forward. Carla won't be sleeping well tonight. I nodded, taking a slow sip of the tea. It was chamomile. Laura knew I couldn't handle coffee when my mind was racing. She had a paper. I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. She said Marcus signed the house over to her 8 weeks ago. I looked at her, the question hanging in the air, the one I was terrified to ask. Did he, Laura? Did my boy really sign it? 4. Laura didn't answer right away. She turned to her large computer monitor. She typed in a password and the screen lit up. I've been busy since you called me from the hotel last night, E, she said. She clicked a file. A document appeared on the screen. It was the quitclaim deed. Carla's name was listed as the grantee. Marcus sent me a scan of this last week. Laura said he was confused. He said Carla had asked him to sign it something about a bank loan. He wanted to know what it meant, so he signed it. I said, my heart sinking. Hold on. Laura clicked again. A second document appeared next to the first. It was a copy of Marcus's signature from his business license. She clicked again. A third document, Marcus's signature from his passport. I sent Marcus' scan to our forensic document examiner at 5 this morning. He owed me a favor. He just sent the report back. I leaned forward. I didn't need to be an expert to see it. The signature on Carla's deed was shaky. The loop on the A was too round. The C in Thompson was cramped like a child trying to stay inside the lines. Marcus's real signature was bold, confident, sharp. It's a fake E, Laura said softly. A forgery, and according to our examiner, it's a terrible one. Amateur. He said, it looks like it was traced but by someone with a shaky hand and a guilty conscience. A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't relief. It was a deeper, colder kind of pain. My son hadn't betrayed me, but his wife had tried to. So she forged his name. I said the words tasting like ash. She tried to steal the house. Yes, Laura said. She did. She closed the file. But that's not even the most important part, E. I looked at her confused. What's more important than fraud? Laura leaned back, lacing her fingers together on the polished mahogany desk. Do you remember the promise you made to Maria E. right before she passed in that hospital room? How could I forget Maria Frail, but her eyes still bright, grabbing my hand? E, she'd whispered. We built this from nothing, from dust and dreams. Don't let some girl with a pretty smile and an empty heart tear it all down. Protect our boy. Protect our work. I remember every word, I whispered. She was always right, wasn't she? Laura smiled. She saw Carla coming a mile away, which is why it doesn't matter if that signature was real. It doesn't matter if Marcus signed that paper 1,000 times over. I frowned. Laura, I don't follow. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a large, heavy, leather-bound document. She slid it across the desk. The gold embossed letters on the cover read, "The Maria Thompson Trust. We set this up the day after Maria's funeral. You remember you were in a fog, but you signed the papers. We transferred every single asset, every deed, every stock portfolio, every brick of every building we ever bought." She tapped the cover, including the bungalow on Old Town. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I looked at Laura and the pieces started to fall into place. The house. You, Elijah Thompson, legally own nothing but the clothes on your back and the personal checking account I manage for you. You haven't owned that house in 12 years. The Maria Thompson Trust owns that house, and I am the executive. A slow, cold understanding settled over me. So even if Marcus had signed it, it would be a worthless piece of paper. Laura finished, a grim satisfaction in her voice. You cannot give away what you do not own. Marcus knew about the trustee. He sat in this very office with us when we explained it. He knew he was a beneficiary, not the owner. He knew everything was protected. So Carla? Carla just tried to steal something that Marcus couldn't even give her. She's not just cruel Eli. She's ignorant. She was so focused on the one little 3-bedroom house she could see she never bothered to ask about the empire it was built on. I sat back, the weight of the revelation settling on me. The legal victory was absolute. Carla was a fool. She had nothing. But the relief didn't come. Instead, a new, much darker question began to form in my mind. I looked out the window. The little ant cars were still moving. The city was still going to work, but my world had stopped. The gears were turning. The grief was clearing. And the sharp mind of the man who built that empire, the man Maria had married, was finally taking over. But Laura, I said slowly, turning back to face her, that doesn't make any sense. What part Marcus, my son? He knew the paper was worthless. He knew about the trust. He was my heir. He was going to inherit everything. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. So why would he forge a document that he knew was useless? Why go through the trouble? Why fake a signature for a house he couldn't sign away? Why would he even show me that scan last week unless Laura's professional mask faded? She knew exactly where my mind was going. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a serious low tone. That Eli, she said, is the $25 million question. The number hung in the air between us. The true value of the Maria Thompson Trust. That's the question I've been asking myself all morning. Why would he do something so illogical? Why would he be confused about a document he knew was fraudulent? She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting me connect the last terrible dot. My blood ran cold. Unless he didn't forge it. Exactly, Laura said. Unless Carla forged it thinking Marcus owned the house and was planning to confront him with it. Unless he sent me that scan because he was scared. Unless he knew something was wrong. She stood up and walked to the window, standing beside me, shoulder to shoulder, looking down on the city. It's all connected, E. The fake signature, the invented debt, the desperate attempt to secure the one asset she could see. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a cold fire I had only seen in Maria. It's all connected to the sudden, convenient, and very timely heart attack of a healthy 45-year-old man. She didn't just want the house, E. Laura said, her voice like ice. She wanted it all. And Marcus, your son Marcus, was just in her way. The conference room in Laura's office was designed to intimidate. 50 floors up, one wall was pure glass looking down on the ant-like rush of River Street. The table was a single massive slab of dark wood polished so heavily you could see your reflection in it. Carla and her new lawyer sat on one side. I knew his type. His name was Mark Levine, and his suit was just a little too shiny. He had the overconfident look of a man who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, especially when he thinks he's about to steamroll a grieving old man. Carla sat next to him, back in her role as the sorrowful widow. She wore a simple black dress and kept a tissue in her hand. She wouldn't look at me. I sat opposite them, silent. Laura Jenkins sat at the head of the table, her files arranged in 3 perfect thin stacks. She was all calm professional control. Mark Levine cleared his throat, a loud, self-important sound. Let's make this simple, he said, sliding a copy of the quitclaim deed across the table. It slid to a stop right in front of me. My client, Mrs. Carla Thompson, is the legal and rightful owner of the property at 456 Old Town Road. Here is the deed signed by her late husband, Mr. Marcus Thompson, 8 weeks prior to his tragic passing. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his cheap suit. Frankly, we are appalled. We understand you're grieving Mr. Thompson, but you are leveraging that grief to harass a widow. It is despicable. Carla let out a small, perfectly timed sob into her tissue. We are here as a courtesy, Mark continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We don't want to add to anyone's pain. But my client has been subjected to police harassment at her own home based on your false report. That ends today. If this harassment continues, we will not hesitate to file for a restraining order, and we will sue you for emotional distress. Now he spread his hands wide. What do you have to say? I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Laura smiled. It was a cold, polite, razor-sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for that performance, Mr. Levine, she said, her voice smooth as glass. I appreciate the theater. Now, let's talk about facts. And she slid a single-page document across the table. This by, she said, is an affidavit from Mr. Carlos Mendoza. He's a board-certified forensic document examiner, and he has already been retained as our expert witness. Mark's smug look faltered. He picked up the paper. Expert witnesses are a dime a dozen. We can get our own. Oh, I insist you do. Laura said, her smile widening. But please have your expert check the ink density. Have him look at the hesitation marks on the upstroke of the A in Marcus. Have him note the pressure patterns, which indicate a slow, deliberate tracing, not a fluid, natural signature. Carla snapped, her voice high-pitched. Marcus was sick. His hand was shaky. Laura raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Was he sick? 8 weeks ago? Mrs. Thompson. Because his co-workers at the mechanic shop all gave statements that he was lifting engine blocks just fine the day before he died. They said he was in perfect health. She leaned forward. No, the signature on this deed is a forgery, and according to Mr. Mendoza, it's a very, very bad one. Mark Levine scoffed, but I could see a bead of sweat on his temple. That's a bold accusation. You can't prove that. It's his word against ours. That's the funny part, Laura said, her voice bright. We don't have to. She let that sit in the air for a second. Mark looked completely lost. What I said, we don't have to prove it's a forgery. I'll save you the trouble of hiring your own expert, Mr. Levine, because even if that signature was 100% genuine, even if Marcus himself flew down from heaven, sat at this table and signed it in front of all of us with a golden pen, it wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on. Mark was now completely pale. What are you talking about? Laura reached down and pulled out a large, heavy leather-bound binder. It made a solid, expensive sound as she placed it on the table. The gold-embossed letters on the cover read, The Maria Thompson Trust. This, Laura said, tapping the cover, is the Maria Thompson Trust. It was established 12 years ago upon the death of Mr. Thompson's wife, Maria. She looked directly at Mark. Mr. Elijah Thompson. My client does not personally own that bungalow. He hasn't owned it for a decade. The Maria Thompson Trust owns that property, and as the executive of that trust, I can tell you unequivocally it is not for sale. Mark's jaw dropped. He frantically shuffled through his own flimsy papers. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Elijah and Maria Thompson. A common mistake for a sloppy lawyer, Laura, said, all the kindness gone from her voice. You ran a simple $60 online search. You didn't check the transfer of assets into the trust filed in River County Docket 24680. It's all public record. If you had bothered to do your due diligence, you would have known your client's deed is worthless. Mark looked at Carla, his face a mask of panic. He just realized his client had lied to him, had involved him in a fraud, and had just been publicly humiliated. He stammered, a trust fund. What trust fund? He looked at me desperate. He's just a carpenter. That's what my client said, just a retired carpenter. Carla couldn't hold it in. All the acting, all the fake grief, all the smug confidence. It all shattered. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the hardwood floor and almost toppled over. He's right, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the high-ceiling room. The mask was gone. This was the real Carla. A trust fund. You're lying. She pointed a shaking, red-nailed finger at me. I hadn't said a single word. I just watched her. He's just an old man, a retired, though. He lives in that dump. He wears old clothes. He doesn't have a trust fund. She was panting, her eyes wide, with a mixture of rage and pure animal panic. You're a liar. You're a broke old carpenter, and you are lying. Laura Jenkins did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. She let Carla's shriek echo off the glass walls and fade into a stunned, heavy silence. Mark Levine, the shiny-suited lawyer, was completely lost. He looked back and forth between Carla and Laura, trying to find his footing on ground that was rapidly turning to quicksand. This is irregular. If you have a trust, we demand to see the documents. Laura simply crossed her arms. Her calm was more terrifying than Carla's rage. Oh, Mr. Levine, she said, her voice dripping with pity. You still don't get it, do you? You're still stuck on the house. You're still thinking like a small-time lawyer. You think this is about one little bungalow? She shook her head, a slow, sad motion. Your client yelled that Mr. Thompson is just a retired carpenter. She's right. He is. He's very proud of the work he did with his hands. He's also the man who quietly over the last 50 years bought up the land that those hands worked on. Laura turned her gaze to Carla, who was still standing panting, her face red and blotchy. Carla, you've been in Riverside for 6 years? You see the new buildings, you see the fancy restaurants, you see the money, but you never bothered to ask who owned the land before it was fashionable. Elijah and his wife, Maria Laura, said, her voice cutting through the silence. Started buying property in the historic ward when no one else would touch it. They bought lots in Riverside Park when it was still just warehouses and broken pavement. They believed in this city. They didn't just work in it, they invested in it. Laura ticked the points off on her fingers. As of this morning, the Maria Thompson Trust, which I execute, holds the deeds to 15 apartment buildings in the historic ward. It owns 4 commercial blocks in Riverside Park. It also, she paused, gesturing around the opulent room, owns the land this entire skyscraper is built on. We are their tenants. Carla's face went from red to a sick, chalky white. Her knees seemed to buckle. Mark Levine made a small choking sound, like he'd swallowed his own tongue. I had been silent this whole time. I had watched this woman who married my son, this woman who checked her watch at his funeral, this woman who tried to throw me out of my home. I watched her realize the truth. Now it was my turn. I leaned forward, placing my hands, a carpenter's hands, rough and calloused, on the polished table. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of that room, it sounded like a hammer blow. We lived simply, I said. Carla flinched as if I had shouted. My wife Maria and I, we didn't believe in showing off. We didn't wear fancy clothes. We didn't drive expensive cars. We didn't need to. We believed in building. We believed in work. I looked right into Carla's terrified eyes. My son Marcus, he knew this. He knew all of it. I was teaching him how to manage the assets, how to read the ledgers, how to be a good steward of what his mother and I had built. He was my heir, I said, letting the words land. He was in training to take over the entire portfolio, an estate Carla valued at roughly $25 million. Twamp. Carla didn't just sit down, she collapsed. She fell back into her chair, her mouth wide open, a soundless O of pure, unadulterated shock. All the air, all the fight, all the venom just vanished. $25 million. She had married a $25 million heir, and she never even knew it. She had been so focused on stealing his car that she never realized he owned the whole dealership. She had tried to forge a deed for a $400,000 house, not knowing he was set to inherit an empire. The look on her face, it wasn't just shock. It was the agony of a lifetime of greed, realizing what it had missed. Mark Levine was just staring at me, his cheap legal pad forgotten. He looked like he was going to be sick. So you see, Laura continued, her voice sharp again, picking up right where I left off. We really don't care about that little house on Old Town. You can't have it. Obviously, the trust will take possession by the end of the day, but the house... She waved a dismissive hand, is no longer the point. Carla looked up confused, her mind still reeling from the numbers. What? What's the point? Laura leaned all the way across the table, her eyes like chips of black ice. The point she said is that we are very, very interested in why you felt the need to forge your husband's signature. We are very interested in why you lied to your own lawyer about non-existent debts. And we are extremely interested, her voice dropped to a whisper. Why my client's son, a perfectly healthy 45-year-old man, suddenly and mysteriously died of a heart attack right after you realized you couldn't get your hands on his money. The panic that flashed across Carla's face was no longer about money. It was about something else entirely. It was the terror of being caught. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, grabbing for her bag, her eyes darting to the door. His death was a tragedy. It was an accident. It was his heart. The meeting with Carla and her lawyer had ended less than an hour ago. Mark Levine had practically run out of the room dragging a catatonic Carla behind him. They didn't say a word. They just fled. Now Laura's office was quiet again. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the cold, ugly truth. My son was dead, and his wife was almost certainly responsible. The door to the conference room opened and Laura walked in, followed by a man I didn't know. He was a big man, built solid like an old oak tree. He wore a suit that looked like it had been slept in, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He looked like he'd spent a lot of time watching people and not missing a single detail. Laura said, "This is Samuel Brooks. Sam, this is my client, Mr. Elijah Thompson." Samuel, or Sam, as he introduced himself, shook my hand. His grip was firm, his hand as rough as my own. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry for your loss. Laura tells me you're in a complicated situation. Sam is the best," Laura said, sitting down at the table. He was a detective with RPD for 25 years. Homicide. Now he finds things for people like us. Things the police don't have time to look for. Sam nodded, taking a seat. He pulled out a small worn leather notebook and a pen. He didn't say anything. He just waited his eyes on me. He was a professional listener. I took a deep breath. It felt strange talking about my family this way, like a betrayal. But Marcus was gone. The time for protecting feelings was over. This was about justice. Carla, my daughter-in-law. I started, my voice still rough. She said Marcus was in debt. That's why he supposedly signed the house over to her. Sam just nodded, writing. Supposedly it's a lie. I said, my son Marcus, he was a good boy. He was smart with his money. He built his own business from the ground up with a little help from me to start. But he wasn't reckless. He wasn't a gambler. He wasn't a fool. I paused the next words hard to get out, but he was blind when it came to her. He loved Carla blindly. I told him I warned him. I remembered a conversation last Christmas. Me and Marcus in my workshop, the smell of sawdust in the air. Son, I'd said that woman of yours, she spends money like it's water. And her eyes, they're hungry. Marcus had just laughed. Pop, you're just old-fashioned. Carla's ambitious. She just likes nice things. There's no harm in that. No harm. I pushed the memory down. I warned him. I repeated to Sam. He didn't listen. Now she says he was in debt. I want to know the truth. I don't believe my son was in debt. I believe she was. I want you to check her finances. Her, not him. Samuel wrote in his notebook. Check the wife's financials. Debts, gambling, credit cards. Got it. Laura leaned forward, taking over. Her voice was pure business. Sam, the situation is this. Carla produced a forged quitclaim deed for Mr. Thompson's house. She did this after her husband's sudden death from a reported heart attack. She believed Mr. Thompson was a retired carpenter with one house. She just found out today that he is in fact the principal of a $25 million trust and that her late husband was the sole heir. Samuel's face didn't change, but his pen stopped moving for just a second. He looked up at Laura. 25 million exactly, Laura said. And she didn't know about it, which means she was desperate enough to commit fraud and possibly murder for a $400,000 house. That's a hell of a motive, Sam said quietly. It gets better. Laura continued. Marcus had already filed for divorce, and he signed a new will a few days before he died, cutting her out completely. Samuel let out a low whistle. So she knew she was about to be left with nothing. No house, no husband, and I'm guessing a lot of bills. That's what we need you to find, I said, my voice firm. Carla said Marcus was in debt. I say she was. Find that debt. Find out who she owed. Find out how desperate she really was. Laura handed him a file. Here's everything we have on her. Social Security number, bank accounts. We know of her car, her workplace. I want to know everything. I want to know what she ate for breakfast. I want to know every call she made. I want to know if she bought any unusual chemicals. I want to know if she searched how to fake a heart attack on her computer. Laura, I added, I want to know why. Why she would do this. Why she would throw it all away. She had him. She had my son's love. Why wasn't that enough? Samuel Brooks closed his notebook. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes beyond professionalism. I saw the eyes of a man who had also seen the worst of people. Mr. Thompson, he said, his voice deep and steady. In my experience, for people like her, it's never enough. Love doesn't pay the bills, not when the bills are from a bookie. He stood up, tucking the file under his arm. I'll start with her financials, the gambling debts, the credit cards. Then I'll trace her movements for the last 3 weeks. Where she went, who she met. I'll pull the security footage from that gas station you mentioned, Laura. I'll find her creditors. He looked at me. You're right, Mr. Thompson. Your son wasn't in debt. She was. And when you're that deep in the hole, you don't need a reason. You just need an opportunity. Laura spoke. Find everything, Sam. I want enough evidence to bury her. This isn't just about a house anymore. I understand Sam said. This is about murder. I'll be in touch within 72 hours. He nodded at me, once a sign of respect, and then he was gone. Laura and I sat in the silence he left behind. The first step was done. The first stone was thrown. Now all we could do was wait for the ripples. He's good, I said. He's the best, Laura replied. He'll find it. I looked out the window again. The city was still shining. It looked so peaceful from up here, but I knew that down there in the streets, I used to know a predator was walking free. A woman who had smiled at my son, and then I was sure had stopped his heart. She called me old man, I said quietly, mostly to myself. What Laura asked. Carla at the house after the funeral, she called me old man. She thought I was just a broke, sad old man. She thought I was weak. She thought I didn't know anything. She thought I was stupid. I turned away from the window and looked at my lawyer. A cold, hard anger was settling in my bones, giving me strength. She's about to find out how wrong she was. Laura's office was quiet. 72 hours had passed since our meeting with Carla. 72 hours of me pacing the floor of my hotel room, waiting. Laura had been working, making calls, her voice a low, steady hum in the background of my grief. I had just sat in that quiet hotel, staring at the riverside skyline, thinking about Marcus, thinking about 45 years. Samuel Brooks was punctual. At exactly 9 he knocked once and entered Laura's office, carrying a thin briefcase and that same worn leather notebook. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He nodded at me, and Laura sat down and opened his file. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Mr. Thompson. Ms. Jenkins. He began, his voice a low rumble. You asked me to find out if Carla Thompson was in debt. And was she? I asked, my voice rough. Samuel looked at me. Mr. Thompson, your daughter-in-law wasn't just in debt. She was drowning in it. You said she was acting like a grieving widow. That's the role she's playing. Laura said, her hands steepled on the desk. Well, Samuel said her grief took her on a road trip. The day after the funeral, the day after she drove her car a car, Marcus paid for 6 hours north. He slid a glossy photograph across the polished table. It wasn't a file photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance. Carla. She was standing at a blackjack table, a stack of chips in front of her. She wasn't crying. She looked desperate, her eyes glued to the cards. Where's this? I asked, my stomach turning. The main floor of the Mountain Resort Casino in Hillside Mountain State. Samuel said taken 24 hours ago. She was there all night, and she wasn't just gambling, she was losing badly. He slid a second photo over. This one was outside under the harsh yellow lights of the casino entrance. Carla was backed against a column, looking terrified. Standing in front of her was a large, imposing man in a cheap suit. He was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. Who is that? Laura asked, leaning in. His name is Smooth Tony Lombardi, Samuel said. He's not a casino employee. He's a loan shark, runs operations out of Lakeside. He looked unhappy. My guy on the ground said she was begging for more time. She wasn't there for fun, Mr. Thompson. She was there to either pay up or beg. So I was right, I said, my voice heavy. She's in deep. You don't know the half of it, Samuel replied. He flipped open his notebook. You said she accused Marcus of being in debt. That was the first thing I checked. He looked at me and his eyes softened for just a second. Your son, Mr. Thompson, he was clean meticulous. His mechanic shop is fully in the black. His credit score was in 780. He had zero debt outside of his share of the property taxes, which were paid on time. He was a solid citizen. Just as we thought, Laura said. But Carla, Samuel continued, Carla is a financial ghost on paper. She has no official credit cards in her name, no car loans, no mortgage, nothing, which is strange for a 35-year-old woman in 2023. She always said Marcus handled all the money, I murmured. He did, Samuel said, but not in the way you think. He was paying for her life, but he wasn't paying for her habits. I had to go deeper. I pulled records from offshore accounts online sports betting sites based in an offshore location, and that's where I found the real story. He turned a page in his notebook. Mrs. Thompson has 4 active high-interest lines of credit with offshore gambling sites. She's been kiting moving money between them to cover her losses, and she has been losing a lot for a long time. Laura leaned forward, her voice like ice. How much, Sam? As of this morning, Samuel said, between the online sites and what my source says she owes Smooth Tony, she is $200,000 in the hole. $200,000. The room felt cold. Marcus's entire life savings, the shop he built it, wouldn't even be enough to cover it. And Eli's trust, Laura whispered, is worth $25 million. She was sitting on a gold mine and couldn't get a penny. It gets worse, Samuel said. She tried to touch it. I found 3 rejected loan applications from the recent month, all attempts to get a home equity loan against your bungalow E, all forged, all using Marcus's name and social security number. The banks rejected them because the property isn't in his name. So she faked the deed. I said the pieces clicking into place. She faked the deed thinking she could use the house as collateral to pay Tony. She must have thought the trust was just some legal nonsense she could bypass. Exactly. Samuel said she was desperate. She was out of time. She was trying to get any asset she could. But Marcus found out. Laura looked up. The argument. You found the security footage. I did, Samuel said. He pulled a small laptop from his briefcase and turned it around. From the fuel station on Maple Avenue the night he died. The call to 911 was made from their apartment at 11:15 p.m. This footage is from 10:30 p.m. He pressed play. There it was. Marcus's familiar blue Ford truck parked under the bright buzzing lights of the gas station. Marcus was in the driver's seat. Carla was in the passenger seat. There was no audio, but we didn't need any. The scene inside that truck was violent. Marcus was yelling, his face dark with a rage I had never seen in my son, not once in his entire 45 years. He was shaking his whole body rigid. Carla was screaming back at him, her face twisted and ugly. My God, I whispered, my hand coming to my mouth. What's that in his hand? Laura asked, pointing at the screen. Watch, Samuel said. Marcus roared something we couldn't hear. He took a thick stack of papers and hurled them right into Carla's face. The white pages exploded in the cab, scattering across the dashboard in her lap like confetti. Carla recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Then she started screaming back, pure fury, trying to gather the papers, her hands grabbing at them. Marcus just pointed a finger in her face, his arms straight and shaking, yelling, yelling, yelling. Then he slammed both hands on the steering wheel so hard the whole truck rocked. He was telling her it was over. I knew my son. That was the end. Samuel paused the video. He drove off 5 minutes later. Roughly an hour after that, Carla called 911 to report her husband was unconscious and not breathing from a heart attack. I stared at the frozen image of my son's angry, betrayed face. The papers. What were those papers, Sam? Was it the forgery? The gambling debts? That's what I assumed, Samuel said. But the deed was just one document. The bank statements maybe, but this was thick. At least 20, 30 pages. It looked official. I was stuck. I spent all yesterday trying to figure out what those papers were. I couldn't find anything. But you found something I said. It wasn't a question. I did, Samuel replied. I started thinking. If Marcus found out about the forgery and the $200,000 $1,000 debt, what's the first thing a smart man does? He doesn't just yell at a gas station. He protects himself. Laura's head snapped up. He calls his lawyer. Exactly. Samuel said, but he didn't call you Ms. Jenkins. You managed the trust. This was marital. This was personal. A divorce attorney, Laura whispered. Bingo, Samuel said. I ran a check on Marcus's private cell phone records for the past month. He made 3 calls to a number I didn't recognize. A private law office in downtown, a high-priced family law specialist named Sofia Ramirez. Very discreet, very expensive. A divorce lawyer. I said the word feeling strange on my tongue. Marcus, he was finally leaving her. A terrible aching sadness mixed with a sharp relief. He was getting out. It looks that way, Mr. Thompson. Samuel said, I went to that office this morning. I showed Miss Ramirez my credentials, explained the circumstances. She was hesitant, citing attorney-client privilege, but when I mentioned the words suspicious death and $25 million trust, she became much more cooperative. Samuel reached into his briefcase and pulled out one last file. It was a thin, legalized envelope. He slid it across the table. What is this? Laura asked, her hand resting on it. Those, Samuel said, are the papers Marcus threw in her face. My hand trembled. Laura opened the flap and pulled out the contents. My God's sake, she whispered. She laid them on the table. The first one was a petition for divorce filed a week before he died. The second one was a new will. The lawyer said Marcus was incredibly proud of it. Samuel said, his voice quiet. He signed it, had it witnessed and notarized just a few days before he died. He was protecting his assets. He was protecting you, Mr. Thompson. I reached out and touched the paper. It was Marcus's new will. It was simple. It was 1 page. It revoked all previous wills. And it stated in clear, bold type that 100% of his personal estate, his business, his truck, his savings, everything outside of the Maria Thompson Trust was to be left to his father, Elijah E. Thompson. Carla's name was nowhere on it. I looked at Laura and she looked at me. The final terrible piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Carla didn't just know she was in debt. She knew she was being cut off. She knew she was being divorced. She knew she was being disinherited. She wasn't just losing a house. She was losing everything. And on that night at that gas station, Marcus had handed her the proof. He had handed her, I realized with a sickening lurch, her own motive for murder. Samuel sat across from me in Laura's glass-walled conference room. The file in his hand was thin, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. $200,000. Samuel said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the polished table. That's my conservative estimate. It's probably more. I just nodded. The number didn't shock me. It just fit like the last piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Smooth Tony Lombardi doesn't like to be kept waiting, Samuel continued. He'd given her until the beginning of the month. That was 10 days from the day Marcus died. She was out of time and out of options. Laura, who had been standing by the window looking down at the city, turned around. Her face was grim. Which brings us to these, she said, walking back to the table. She was holding a manila envelope. It was not from her files. It was from the outside. Sofia Ramirez. The divorce attorney Samuel found gave these to me this morning. She said Marcus was agitated when he came to her. He was angry, but he was also terrified. He told her he thought Carla was capable of anything. My hands clenched on the table. He was right, Laura said softly. Miss Ramirez said that after Marcus signed the documents, he asked her to hold the originals. He said he was going to give Carla copies. He wanted to do it in person. He said she needs to see that it's real. She needs to know it's over. Kadindra looked at me. These, she said, tapping the envelope, are the originals. These are the papers Marcus threw in his wife's face less than an hour before she called 911. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as Laura's slim, steady hands opened the flap and slid two documents out. She pushed the first one toward me. I didn't need my reading glasses to see the large, bold letters at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I traced the names with my finger. Marcus Thompson, petitioner. Carla Thompson, respondent. I saw the date it was filed with the River County Court, a week before he died. He did it. I whispered, a terrible aching sadness washing over me. He was finally leaving her. He was getting out. He was E. Laura said he was getting out. He was protecting himself, and he was protecting you. She pushed the second document toward me. This one was different. It wasn't a court filing. It was simpler. I read the title, Last Will and Testament of Marcus Thompson. I looked at the date a few days before he died, signed, witnessed, and notarized in Sofia Ramirez's office. My eyes scanned the text. It was short to the point, just like my son. I, Marcus Thompson, hereby revoke any and all former wills and testaments. I read the next paragraph. I give device and bequeath 100% of my personal estate, including my business, Marcus's Auto Service, all bank accounts held in my name, my vehicle, and all personal effects. To my father, Elijah Thompson. I read the paragraph again and again, looking for the name that wasn't there. Carla's name was gone. She was completely, totally, and legally disinherited. The room was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city 50 floors below. I looked at the divorce papers. I looked at the new will. I thought about Samuel's words, $200,000. I thought about the forged deed. And I thought about that grainy video at the gas station. My son, his face dark with rage, throwing those very papers at the woman who was screaming at him. He wasn't just yelling at her. He was showing her. He was showing her the end of her entire world. I looked up at Laura. The cold, hard certainty finally settling in my heart, sharp and heavy as a shard of steel. She knew, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was dead. That night I sat in that truck, she knew. She wasn't just losing a house she couldn't get. She was losing everything. I stood up the chair, scraping back, and walked to the glass wall. I looked down at the city, at all those moving cars, all those people living their lives, not knowing what was happening up here. The divorce meant she got nothing from him in life. The will meant she got nothing from him in death. The debt meant her creditors were about to break her legs. She had nothing, I whispered. He had just handed her proof that she had absolutely nothing left to lose. I turned around and faced them. The grief was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but now it was surrounded by a cold, righteous anger. Laura Jenkins stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. "That's right, she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. This is no longer about a forged signature. This isn't about fraud. This isn't about a house." She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. "This," she said, "is motive. This is premeditation. This is murder." Carla was in my living room, my wife's living room, when the courier arrived. She was probably counting the minutes until she could sell Maria's antique furniture. She signed for the large legal envelope with an annoyed flourish, probably thinking it was just more paperwork from her own incompetent lawyer. She ripped it open with one of her long red nails. She pulled out the documents. I wish I could have seen her face in that moment. She read the first page. It was a formal notice from Laura Jenkins' law firm informing her that a civil investigation was underway regarding the fraudulent deed. She probably scoffed at that old news. Then she read the second page. It was a copy of the report from the forensic document examiner. It detailed in cold scientific language exactly how the signature was a forgery. It mentioned hesitation marks, unnatural pressure, and clear evidence of tracing. Her heart probably started to beat a little faster then. Then she read the third page. It was a sworn affidavit from Sofia Ramirez, Marcus's divorce attorney. It stated that Marcus had retained her services to begin divorce proceedings. Carla's breath probably caught in her throat. Then she read the fourth and final page, a certified copy of Marcus's new will. The will that left her with nothing, absolutely nothing. The papers must have slipped from her fingers. She wasn't just losing the house. She had already lost everything before Marcus even died. The whole thing, her entire plan, had been for nothing. She was trapped. She was a self-confessed fraud. I can see her pacing the floor, panicking, the walls of my house closing in on her. She probably thought about the police, about the questions they asked. Suspicious circumstances. She probably thought about her debts. $200, $1,000. Smooth Tony Lombardi. The beginning of the month was coming. She wasn't just going to be broke. She wasn't just going to be homeless. She was going to jail. And then she would have thought about Marcus, about his death, about that heart attack. She would have realized that Eli and Laura weren't just investigating the house. They were investigating her. They were looking for a murderer. She was completely and totally cornered. All the facts, all the money, all the law, it was all on my side. She had no way out. So she did what cornered animals do. She decided to bite. She couldn't fight me on the facts. The facts would put her in a prison cell for the rest of her life. She couldn't fight me with money. She just found out I had all of it, and she had none. So she decided to fight me with the one weapon she had left. The one weapon she knew how to use. She would fight me in the court of public opinion. She would change the story. This wouldn't be about a grieving father seeking justice for his murdered son. Oh no, she was much smarter than that. She picked up her phone. Her hands were probably shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. She scrolled through her contacts past the loan sharks and the bookies until she found a name. Jamie Reed, Channel 8 News. A local reporter she'd met at a party once, a man she knew was always looking for a juicy, sensational story. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. And when she opened them, she was no longer the panicked fraud. She was the grieving widow. She summoned the tears. She pressed the call button. Jamie, she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. Jamie Reed. It's Carla Thompson, Marcus's wife. She paused, letting out a perfectly timed sob. Yes, thank you. It's just been a nightmare. Thank you for your card. Another pause. Jamie, I'm so scared. I didn't know who else to call. Something terrible is happening. It's my father-in-law, Elijah Thompson. Yes, the one who owns all that property. He's trying to take everything from me, Jamie. I'm a widow. My husband has only been in the ground for 3 days, and he's trying to throw me out on the street. He's saying I forged papers. He's saying God. He's saying I'm a criminal. She was crying for real now, I'm sure. Tears of pure manipulative genius. I don't know what to do. I'm just a grieving white woman, Jamie, and he's this rich, powerful black millionaire, and he's trying to destroy me. He's using all his money, all his lawyers, and I have no one. Please, can you just tell my story? She listened, then nodded, wiping away her fake tears. Yes, I can be ready in an hour. Thank you, Jamie. You're saving my life. She hung up the phone. The tears stopped instantly. Her face, I imagined, set into a mask of cold, hard calculation. She couldn't win in a court of law, so she was going to put me on trial on the 700 News. Let's see how Riverside likes that story, old man, she probably whispered to the empty, silent house. Let's see them turn against the poor, grieving widow. I was in my hotel room when Laura called me. She didn't say hello. She just said, turn on Channel 8 now. I fumbled for the remote, my hands shaking. The hotel television flickered on the 700 News. There was my house, my porch. The porch Maria and I had spent thousands of nights on, watching the world go by. And there was Carla. She looked small, fragile. She was wearing a simple white blouse, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like a victim. She was dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue as she spoke to the reporter, Jamie Reed. His face was a mask of professional concern. I just don't know where else to turn, Carla whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. My husband, Marcus, he's only been gone for a few days. She broke down, a sob catching in her throat. The camera zoomed in on a single tear rolling down her cheek. The reporter put a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Thompson, you made some very serious claims. Can you tell us what is happening? Carla took a shaky breath. It's my father-in-law, Elijah Thompson. She said my name like it was a curse. He's trying to throw me out of my home. The reporter looked shocked. He's evicting you just days after you buried his son. Yes, she cried, the tears coming faster. He's a very wealthy man, a real estate millionaire. He owns half of Riverside, and I'm just a widow with nothing. And he wants to take the one thing my husband Marcus left me, this house. I couldn't breathe. I was just staring at the screen. She was brilliant. She was a monster, but she was brilliant. He never liked me. She continued looking right into the camera, into the eyes of every person in Riverside watching. He never thought I was good enough for Marcus. He never accepted our marriage. She paused as if gathering the courage to say the next part. Maybe it's because I'm not from his world. I'm just a simple white woman from Lakeside. I don't have his power. I don't have his money. There it was. She did it. She actually did it. And now that Marcus is gone, she sobbed. There's no one left to protect me. He's punishing me for loving his son. What am I supposed to do? What can a lonely, grieving white widow do against a powerful, wealthy man like that? He has teams of lawyers. I have nothing, just my husband's memory, and he's trying to steal that too. The reporter, Jamie Reed, looked directly into the camera, his face filled with outrage, a shocking accusation. Mrs. Thompson, are you saying you're being forced out onto the street? He gave me 60 days, she whispered, as if the words were too painful to say. 60 days, right after the funeral. He told me to get out. He wants me gone. Please, somebody help me. The screen cut back to the news anchor in the studio, her face a mask of disbelief and sympathy. A truly heartbreaking story. We've reached out to Mr. Elijah Thompson's representatives for a comment, but have not yet heard back. Laura's phone buzzed in my hand. I had thrown mine against the wall. Her office line, her cell phone, my hotel phone. They were all ringing. A storm had just broken over my head. Laura clicked off the television with the remote. The silence in her office was deafening. She looked at her buzzing cell phone on the desk. The screen was lit up. It was a local news blog. The headline read, Grieving Widow versus Riverside Millionaire. She looked at another one. Old Townland Baron tries to evict white daughter-in-law. She did it, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. She's standing on my porch in front of my house, a house Maria and I built with our bare hands, and she's telling the world I'm the monster. I stood up and walked to the window. The silence in her office was deafening. She looked at her buzzing cell phone on the desk. The screen was lit up. It was a local news blog. The headline read, Grieving Widow versus Riverside Millionaire. She looked at another one. Old Townland Baron tries to evict white daughter-in-law. She did it, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. She's standing on my porch in front of my house, a house Maria and I built with our bare hands, and she's telling the world I'm the monster. I stood up and walked to the window. The silence was deafening. Do not repeat. After what she did after killing him, she dares to use her skin color against mine as a weapon. I turned from the window, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. She's telling them I'm the powerful black millionaire oppressing the poor little white woman in Riverside. She knows exactly what she's doing. Yes, she does, Laura said, her voice calm. Get on the phone, I ordered. Call the station. Call every station. We'll tell them the truth. We'll show them the will, the divorce papers, the $200,000 gambling debt. We'll destroy her. Laura held up a single steady hand. No. The word stopped me cold. No. What do you mean, no? She is slandering my name. She is destroying my reputation. She is painting me as a racist monster. Eli, listen to me, Laura said, her voice cutting through my rage. This is exactly what she wants. She's cornered. She has no facts. She has no case. She can't win in a court of law, so she's trying to win in the court of public opinion. She wants a media fight. Laura continued, she knows if we jump into this mud pit with her, we just get dirty. We will look like we're attacking the poor grieving widow she's pretending to be. We would be proving her point, so we just let her, I roared. We let her do this. We let her talk, Laura said, a cold, hard smile forming on her face. We let her go on every show that will have her. We let her cry her fake tears all over Riverside. We let her lie and lie and lie again. Why I demanded. Because she's not just lying, E. She's committing perjury before she even gets to the stand. Every single word she says on television is another lie we can disprove with facts. She is building our case for us. She is hanging herself with her own tongue. She picked up her phone. Samuel is still working. He's not looking for gambling debts anymore. He's talking to the coroner's office. He's pulling the 911 call. He's finding the money trail. Laura looked at me. her eyes as fierce as Maria's ever were. Carla thinks she's playing checkers on the 700 News. We are playing chess in a federal courthouse. So let her talk, let her slander you, let her cry to the entire city. She walked over and stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, looking out the window. We will not respond on television. Eli, we will respond in court with the forged deed, with the divorce papers, with the new will, with the gambling debts. And she took a deep breath with the medical examiner's final report. And when we do, we will not just take back your good name, we will take away her freedom. I looked at the city lights twinkling on below. The rage in my chest slowly cooled, hardening back into that block of ice. She was right. Let her talk. The River County Courthouse is a cold place. It's not like on television. The marble floors are worn and the air smells like stale coffee and floor polish. I sat on a hard wooden bench next to Laura, wearing my Sunday suit, the one I buried Maria in, the one I buried Marcus in. Across the room sat Carla. She was back in her widow's costume, a simple black dress, a delicate veil covering her face. She held a tissue. She was performing. Her lawyer, Mark Levine, was strutting in front of the judge's bench like he owned the place. He was performing too. The courtroom was half full. That reporter, Jamie Reed, was in the front row, his pen ready. Carla had made sure of that. Your Honor, Mark Levine said, his voice booming in the quiet room. This is a tragedy. A simple, heartbreaking tragedy. He gestured dramatically toward Carla, who produced a perfect quiet soba on cue. We are here because my client, a grieving, penniless widow, is being harassed by this man. He pointed at me. Elijah Thompson, a man who we have recently discovered is not a simple carpenter, but a wealthy real estate baron, a man of considerable hidden power. He let those words hang in the air. He was already playing his hand. This is a simple case of greed, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson is leveraging the death of his own son to persecute his daughter-in-law. And I must say the racial undertones are disturbing. A powerful, wealthy black man using his teams of lawyers to intimidate and evict a grieving, vulnerable white woman from her home. I watched the judge, Judge Harlan, an older black woman, sharp as a tack, with eyes that looked like they had heard every lie in the world. She didn't blink. She just looked bored. Mark Levine continued his performance. My client is the victim here. All she wants is the home her loving husband gave her. This is nothing short of a public lynching, and we demand justice. He sat down looking very pleased with himself. The reporter was scribbling frantically. Judge Harlan looked at us. Her voice was tired. Ms. Jenkins, your response. Laura stood up. She was the picture of calm. Your Honor. Mr. Levine is correct about one thing. This is a tragedy, but it is not the one he is describing. She picked up the forged deed. He has filed a suit to claim ownership of the property at 456 Old Town Road. He claims his client is the victim. Laura placed the paper back down. We are not here to debate the ownership of that house, Your Honor. In fact, we move for an immediate summary dismissal of this entire case. Mark Levine shot up from his chair. On what grounds we have a deed? It is a valid legal document. Judge Harlan fixed him with a cold stare. Sit down, Mr. Levine. You will wait your turn. She looked back at Laura. On what grounds, Miss Jenkins? Laura's voice was clear and sharp as glass. On the grounds that the suit is frivolous. Your Honor, the guarantor. Mr. Marcus Thompson had no legal authority to sign that deed because neither he nor his father, my client, owns that property. Mark Levine's mouth dropped open. What? The property at 456 Old Town Road. Laura continued. Like all of Mr. Thompson's properties, was placed into a protected irrevocable trust, the Maria Thompson Trust. It was established 12 years ago. Mr. Elijah Thompson is the beneficiary. I am the executive. Marcus Thompson could not give away a house he did not own. Carla's lawyer was completely lost. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Elijah and Maria Thompson. A common mistake for a sloppy lawyer, Laura said, her voice cutting. You ran a $60 online search. You didn't check the transfer of assets into the trust filed in River County, docket 24680. It is all public record. If you had bothered to do your due diligence, counselor, you would have known your client's deed is worthless. Mark Levine was white as a sheet. He looked at Carla, his career and his life flashing before his eyes. Judge Harlan looked at him over her glasses. "Is this true, Mr. Levine?" "Did you check the trust filings?" Mark stammered. We were not aware." The judge slammed her gavel. The sound cracked through the room. "Then this case is dismissed. We are done here." Carla looked at Mark, her face twisted in confusion and rage. "What does that mean? What just happened?" Mark was packing his briefcase, his hands shaking. It means you lost the house." But Laura wasn't finished. She didn't sit down. "Your Honor," she said before we are dismissed. "Mr. Levine, on behalf of his client, publicly accused my client of harassment and malicious intent. He did this on television, and he did it again in this courtroom. My client's reputation has been slandered. The truth must be entered into the record." Judge Harlan. "Miss Jenkins, the case is dismissed." "I understand, Your Honor," Laura said, her voice firm. "But the reason for this fraudulent deed is now part of an active criminal investigation. The press is here. The public is here. The truth must be heard." The judge looked at the reporter, then at me, then back at Laura. "You have 3 minutes, Miss Jenkins. Make them count." Laura smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor." She turned slightly, facing not just the judge, but the whole room. "Mr. Levine claims his client is a penniless widow. He is half right. She is penniless, but not because my client is greedy." Laura held up a new file. "She is penniless because she has a $200,000 gambling debt owed to Mr. Tony Lombardi of Lakeside." Carla gasped. Mark Levine objected, but the judge just waved him into silence. She was desperate. Laura continued, "Which is why she forged the deed. She knew she couldn't ask her husband for the money. Why? Because Mr. Marcus Thompson had just served her with these." Laura held up the second document. "A petition for divorce." He was leaving her. A wave of murmurs went through the courtroom. The reporter was writing so fast I thought his pen would catch fire. Carla Thompson was about to be divorced, exposed, and left with nothing but her debts. Marcus knew exactly who he was married to, which is why a few days before he died, he signed a new will. Laura held up the third document, a will that explicitly disinherits his wife Carla and leaves 100% of his personal estate to his father, Elijah Thompson. The room was in total shock. Carla finally found her voice. It wasn't a whisper. It was a raw animal scream. "Liar. You are a liar. He loved me. He would never." Judge Harlan slammed her gavel again and again. Order in this court. Mrs. Thompson, control yourself or I will have you removed." Laura waited. She waited until Carla's screams turned into hysterical sobs. Then her voice dropped, becoming deadly quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "She's right about one thing, Your Honor. Marcus isn't here to tell us. She made sure of that." "Objection?" Mark yelled on his feet. "Slander. My client is the victim." "It is not slander," Laura said, "when it is a fact, Your Honor. Because of this clear financial motive, the divorce, the disinheritance, the debt, we petitioned the state for a full autopsy. We had Marcus Thompson's body exhumed last week." Carla froze. Her sobs stopped. She looked up, her face a mask of pure terror. Laura held up the last thickest file. "I have here the final report from the River County Medical Examiner. Marcus Thompson did not die of a heart attack. His heart was perfectly healthy." I watched Carla. Her eyes were wide. She wasn't breathing. "He died," Laura announced, "of massive systemic internal bleeding caused by lethal doses of warfarin rat poison administered in his coffee over a period of several weeks. A slow, agonizing, painful death. Laura Jenkins, my protector. My wife's legacy turned from the judge." She looked directly at Carla. Her voice rang out clear and final. "You didn't just lose the house, Carla. You murdered him." Carla collapsed. It wasn't a faint. It was a complete breakdown. A wail came out of her, a sound of pure damned guilt. Mark Levine just sat there, his career and his life flashing before his eyes. And then I saw them, the same two officers who had stood on my porch, Officer Harris and Officer Patel. They had been standing quietly at the back of the courtroom the entire time. They began to walk forward. They walked past the gasping reporter. They walked past the shocked crowd. They walked right up to the defense table where Carla was sobbing hysterically, screaming, "No, no, no! He's lying! They're lying!" Officer Harris put his heavy hand on her shoulder. "Carla Thompson, you are under arrest for the first-degree murder of Marcus Thompson." The reporter's camera flashed a blinding white light. Carla screamed as they pulled her to her feet, twisted her arms behind her back, and snapped the handcuffs on. "It was him!" She shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "It was the old man! He set me up! He framed me! He killed his own son!" But no one was listening. They dragged her out of the courtroom, her screams echoing down the marble hallway. I just sat there next to Laura. I watched her go. I did not feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I just felt quiet. I looked at the empty chair where my son's murderer had just been, and for the first time since Marcus's funeral, I felt the ice in my chest finally begin to melt. Justice Maria, I thought. I kept my promise. Justice for our boy. It was 6 months before I could walk back into my house on Old Town Road. 6 months of legal depositions, of signing papers, of listening to the ugly details of Carla's appeals being denied. The media circus had finally died down. The cameras were gone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I had asked Laura to meet me there. The police had removed the tape weeks ago, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to cross the threshold. Today I finally did. It smelled musty, like a place that had been locked up with its grief for too long, but it was clean. Laura had hired a service to come in and put everything back in order. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the one I built, sipping a cup of tea. She looked tired, but she smiled when I walked in. "It's good to see you home, E," she said softly. I nodded, my throat tight. I walked over to the mantel. The pictures were still there. Me and Maria on our wedding day. Marcus, 7 years old, holding up a crooked birdhouse he'd made in my workshop, that big gap-toothed smile on his face. "She'll never get out, you know," Laura said to my back. "The state's case was airtight, first-degree murder with special circumstances of financial gain. They won't ever grant her parole. She's going to die in prison." I touched the frame of Marcus's photo. A life for a life seems like a bad trade all around. I turned and sat down across from her. The kitchen was just as I'd left it, except for a large roll of paper spread out on the table. Blueprints. Laura looked at them, then at me. "So what are you going to do now, E, with all of this?" "All of this," I repeated, looking around the small, simple room. This little bungalow was what Carla had killed for, this little piece of wood and plaster. I looked back at the picture of my son. The craziest part, I said, my voice rough. The part I still can't get out of my head is that she did all of it. The lies, the forgery, the poison. She did it all for this. I tapped the table. This 3-bedroom house, maybe $400,000 on a good day. I looked at Laura. She had no idea, did she? She was married to the heir of $25 million, and she murdered him for pocket change. She was ignorant, E, Laura said, and she was greedy. It's a bad combination. All that money, I said, shaking my head. All those years Maria and I worked saving, building, investing, all of it. And the only thing Carla could see was the one thing right in front of her nose. I was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the clock on the wall, the same clock that had ticked through Marcus's entire childhood. Laura pointed to the blueprints on the table. "You've been busy." "I've been thinking," I said, "thinking about what Maria wanted. Protect our work," she told me. I thought she meant I should protect the money, the buildings, the assets. But I was wrong. I've been wrong for 12 years. "What do you mean?" Laura asked. I unrolled the blueprints. They weren't for a house. They were for a large, low-slung building. It had wide doors, high ceilings, and rows of workbenches. She didn't mean the money, Laura. She meant the work, the value of it, the pride in it. I looked out the kitchen window past my small yard toward the neighborhood I'd lived in my whole life, toward the kids I saw on the corners with nothing to do, no place to go. Kids who looked just like Marcus did once upon a time. "Laura," I said, turning back to her. My voice was steady. "Now I want you to start the process. Begin liquidating the non-essential assets. Sell the commercial block in Riverside Park and the apartments over on Edgewood. We have enough." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Enough for what, Eli, you planning on moving to the Bahamas?" I smiled. The first real, genuine smile I'd felt in months. It felt strange on my face. No, I'm staying right here. It's time to finally use the Maria Thompson Trust for what it was meant for. I tapped the blueprints. I'm going to build a community center right here in this neighborhood, a place for these kids. But not just a place to play basketball. I'm going to build a workshop, a state-of-the-art carpentry and mechanic shop. Free for any kid in Riverside who wants to learn how to build something with their hands instead of just taking what isn't theirs. Laura looked at the plans, then back at me, and I saw her professional mask melt away. I saw the kid who used to run around these streets with my son. She was smiling. We'll teach them how to read a plan. I said, my voice growing stronger, a new purpose settling into my bones. How to measure twice and cut once. How to respect the tools. How to feel that pride when you've made something real. What are you going to call it? She asked. I looked back at the mantel, at my boy with his gap-toothed smile holding that crooked birdhouse. We're going to call it Marcus's Workshop. I looked back at Laura. Maria and I spent 50 years building our assets. It's time to stop building assets, Laura. It's time to start building a future. If there is one thing I have learned from this nightmare, it is this. Never underestimate the person who is quiet. The world is full of people like Carla, who measure your worth by the shine on your shoes or the car you drive. They are loud, arrogant, and blind. But true strength, true wealth is built in silence. It is built on character, patience, and loyalty. Greed always overplays its hand and destroys itself. The truth, however, just waits patiently in the shadows, ready for its moment to be told. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, I have to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have seen the warning signs in Carla? Have you ever felt underestimated by someone who only saw the surface and missed who you truly were? Let me know your own story and where you are watching from in the comments below. Your stories give me strength. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so I can continue to share my journey with